work program that we've been working on for a bit here at the district. So I can get the next slide, Nick. So I'm going to be presenting this presentation. I'm the utilities manager. We have online, as you saw, Greg Buckles, the director of utilities, and also Ruth will be helping facilitate this discussion as our public engagement specialist. So I do have some notes as I'm going through this. So I'm looking down. That's what I'm doing. But this presentation, I'm looking to provide a bit of an overview as the history of the public water systems and why there's very little in the way of public water systems in the Carr's Landing area. Give an overview of some of the work staff and council have been doing in terms of options to try to bring a public water system out into the area. Advise of council's policy in relation to the transfer of private infrastructure to becoming public, and advise some of the legal framework around that process. And one of the big things we're really looking to do is receive some feedback from the Carr's Landing area in terms of the water servicing to the area. So prior to incorporation, let's see if I can see the mouse here. In 1995, the district's water system were either private or they had irrigation districts. And so there were 3 irrigation districts in our area. The first on the west bench of Oyama was the Oyama Irrigation District. And then to the east of that, we had the Wood Lake Irrigation District. And then in the Winfield-Okanagan area, we had the Winfield-Okanagan Center Irrigation District. And so there's a long history of these properties actually paying towards bringing water infrastructure into this area through their rates and some various senior government programs, primarily the ARTA program in the late 60s and 70s did actually help to build some of these systems. But since then, a lot of the development or expanding, when the system is expanded, is the benefiting party is actually paid for the improvements. At the time of incorporation in 1995, this black boundary was drawn around these, and the water systems were actually brought in as a public water system at the time, with their letters patent turned over to the district. I should note there's 2 satellite water systems in the last 20 years the districts have actually started to operate. One to the north here, the Coral Beach water system, and then on the south end of Carr's Landing it's not actually part of the boundary of Carr's Landing, but it's at the south end of Carr's Landing Road is the Lake Pine water system. And these systems actually formed local service areas. I'll get into what a local service area is in a little bit past this, later in this presentation, but they actually formed local service areas to do some improvements in order to be taken over by the district. So in 2020, Council initiated an update to our 2012 Water Master Plan. So what is a Water Master Plan? So the key overarching document of itself is that it's a plan that identifies key initiatives related to new and existing infrastructure. And then a key part of that also includes a financial plan to ensure adequate funding is received through our water rates. So when it comes to funding our public water systems, we have our water rates from our user fees, developer cost charges. Those are contributions made by development as they subdivide lots or build multifamily properties or industrial commercial institutions, or grant funding. And grant funding goes typically towards just one direct project that we've applied for and we're successful. In 2012, the Water Master Plan identified the need for developing a servicing plan for the greater Carr's Landing area. Another thing too is Eastside Utilities did an engineering study that identified the benefit of this being taken over as a public water utility. There's a lot in that plan, but I talk about that. And then also with that, Eastside actually did contribute some funds in order to help develop this concept that we've been working on. So I'm not sure who was able to attend that's here tonight, the meeting last night with Eastside Utility, but just to summarize the presentation that was brought forward by the province. So the report prepared by the province indicates that the system requires approximately $18 million worth of improvements in order to address water quality issues, aging infrastructure, and fire flow inadequacies. In order to fund that just as a private water utility, they're looking at some pretty significant rate increases that they'd be required to pay over the next 20 years by the user group. And then they also expressed their challenges as being a private water utility, and that they aren't eligible to receive grant funding or apply for grant funding, nor are they eligible to borrow money to do these projects. So they have to build the reserves prior to being able to actually do the improvements. So a lot of the driver around the Carr's Landing servicing concept was some of these challenges in Eastside Utility, but we wanted to look at not just the Eastside Utility, but this whole area here that's currently that doesn't have a public water system. We do have Coral Beach to the north that's technically a public water system, and we run it as a satellite water system. Then we have these areas in between, and then on the south here we have Lake Pine, but there's Barkley Water User Group. These properties all have their own individual lake intakes. We call these the private Carr's Landing. They either have wells or their own lake intakes also. The area in yellow is Eastside Utility, and then the Coral Beach Water System. And the Coral Beach Water System actually has a lot of the same problems as Eastside Utility in that it has undersized infrastructure, it's aging, and also the reservoir is not large enough to fight any fire of significant size. So there's two key reasons why we were looking to develop a plan to service the broader Carr's Landing. It's very financially inefficient to run a satellite water system just on its own, particularly if you don't have the population in it, as you're seeing with some of the rate increases that they're talking about in order to improve Eastside Utility. And then economies of scale, right? If we're looking at a project to bring it out to a large area, the more people that could potentially pay for it makes it cheaper for everybody. And this broader area is approximately 325 people versus the about 150 people that are on Eastside Utility. Next slide, Nick. So some of the key issues we're looking to improve, and I did with the Carr's Landing service strategy, is we're looking
Kyle, can I just clarify? You said 325 people and 150 people. That's actually residents, right?
Sorry, yes, it's properties, not people. I apologize. Thank you, Greg. We're looking to improve issues around water quality in the area, fire protection inadequacies. We're looking to build a system to be able to suppress an active fire effectively, and then also address some of the aging infrastructure issues that are known in the area. So we looked at three options for servicing that area. The first was to construct a new pump station on Okanagan Lake that would pump up to an existing reservoir in a Lake Pine water system. Our Lake Pine water system has a fairly large reservoir that was built in 2009 by a developer there that is large enough to provide fire protection to the area. And then we'd look from, after pumping up water to that reservoir, extend service to the north from that reservoir. The other option that we looked at was interconnecting the Lake Pine water system to our Beaver Lake source. So the Lake Pine water system on its own does not have the capacity to service the whole area, but if we connect it to our Beaver Lake source, it would. And then again, we'd use that same reservoir on that system to extend it north. We also looked at bringing water over from the lake subdivision, and we ran into challenges right away with just land acquisition and trying to figure out how that would work, and it deemed to be not feasible pretty quickly. And ultimately, what we landed on, the solution that would be the best is actually to connect Lake Pine to our Beaver Lake source and then extend service north into the area. So just a quick highlight of what that looks like. There's a reservoir here. Many of you maybe have gone hiking up in that area. In the backside of Spine Cop, there's a large reservoir there. And then we basically extend north out into all these areas. So there's some pretty major considerations that come into play when considering a servicing strategy and when it could take place, right? So one of the things with this servicing strategy that's a challenge is water quality, right? Our Beaver Lake source right now is on a permanent water quality advisory, and it will be until water treatment plant is built. We're currently trying to build a water treatment plant on that source by 2025, but there's a lot of external factors that could influence when that exactly is delivered. It's very expensive. The project itself, when you take, it's about $20 million. Over 325 properties. It was funded solely by the properties, and I'll get into council policy around that. It's looking closer to anywhere from $60,000 to $70,000 per property if they were to be in favor of that. And then timing is when does the community have the ability to deliver a project of this size. So council's policy on expansion of our water systems or takeover of a private water system is our policy, water restructure policy 08100. So it provides guidance in the acquisition of private water utilities or water system expansion. It stipulates the standards of which this infrastructure needs to be built or at prior to takeover. And then it also stipulates that the joining user groups pay for the improvements, typically done through the formation of a local service area. And so there's some good rationale behind this policy, right? It expresses council's desire to have private water utilities to be operated by the district. It ensures infrastructure is in good condition prior to transfer to the existing ratepayers. And that's because they don't want to add additional cost on those ratepayers by taking on that infrastructure. And so council may eventually elect to deviate a bit from this policy in regards to this, but at the same time, that's a council decision. So up until then, that will always be a council decision. We've heard people from the community asking, would there be opportunity for grant funding in order to go out and do a project like this? And yes, we've talked to the people that at the province that are in charge of administering the grant programs, and they've definitely said this is the type of project that they would consider funding. But these grant programs come out every 1 to 2 years for projects of these sizes. And we've already have a number of projects, so you can only submit one application at a time, and that doesn't even mean you're going to be successful. And we also have a number of key projects already identified within some of our planning documents, one being for our wastewater treatment plant. We need to build a treated wastewater outfall to Okanagan Lake in order to facilitate our community growth that we're seeing. We have some key areas within the community that we'd like to retrofit sewer. And then also, as I've already talked about, the Beaver Lake water treatment plant is another project that wouldn't go ahead without senior government support. So when it comes to transferring a private water system to the public or the local government, it is a process that requires electoral assent or the properties to vote in favor of doing so. Electoral assent, typically in this process, we achieve through what's called as a local service area petition. And so what a local service area is, so a municipality can expand services such as water and sewer within the community, and it uses a local service area process typically to pay for the improvements. It's not always, but usually a council initiated process, and local service areas are paid for in part or in whole by the local property owners contained within that local service area. And so in order for that petition to be successful, it typically requires two things. One, that 50% of the property owners vote in favor, and then also 50% of the land value votes in favor. So you can have a scenario where 50% or greater of the properties vote, but if a lot of the higher land values vote against it, it actually can defeat the process. So with that, we're not necessarily looking to come up with solutions exactly how we go out into the area and administer this local service area process, but we would really like to hear back from the Carr's Landing area and the East Side utility customers and the whole area around. Is this something that they would be interested in pursuing as a community? I know our council is definitely interested in hearing back from that. We do have a survey out right now with the Lake Country Water Master Plan. There are some questions directly related to this, and then there's also opportunities just to fill in the blank to let us know what your thoughts are on it. The survey will be open till June 10th, and we will take those results and convey that to council, and council would be ultimately the ones that we think would be look to initiate if there is interest in initiating the local surface area process. Okay, that's all I have for right now.
If anyone online has a question, please just raise your virtual hand and we'll call upon you.
So maybe I could just add a little bit. Well done, Kyle. So a couple of things that come up when we're looking at any type of infrastructure planning, and because there's typically always investments required, and it goes right to the level of service that we're providing the community. And so, typically the questions that come up is, what are the benefits? What's in it for me? And what's it going to cost? And so, some of the things that, and council has really raised this, and things that we're considering is, fire protection in the area. And this is becoming increasingly important as we're seeing, climate change impacts, interface fires, and having better fire protection in the Carr's Landing community would be a great benefit. When we had the fires in Raven Ridge, if we didn't have the fire protection capabilities there, it could have been a lot worse, on the ground. No, you don't fight wildfires necessarily, on a municipal system, but they sure can help protect structures and save lives. So fire protection is a very important aspect of this. The other aspects are related to ongoing water quality concerns and some of these systems and aging infrastructure and being able to provide sustainable, ongoing, reliable service. So those are the benefits. The cost question is not fully answered yet, and that would come out in the local service area process. And it needs to be well defined and stipulated, and then once that's set, it's set. It doesn't change after. Typically, doesn't change after the petition. I think you saw the vision there. One of the key aspects we had in there was the issue of affordability. And so this was something we did discuss last night, and recognizing, the numbers that we're talking about here are very large. And one of the mechanisms that council has, we'll need to consider with this is the pace of the improvements made. And so, is this the policy basically states that the improvements need to be made at the time of turnover or transfer or expansion. But there, in this case, it might be an instance where we need to look at how we would phase that in over time. And is that a 20-year time frame and a 30-year time frame? And what things are essential initially, and then what things can happen with the benefit of time, so that we can spread those costs over a longer period. And that can have a big impact on making things more affordable. Obviously, if we get grant support, which is a competitive process, and amongst all the other local governments that are, and they're always overprescribed. So we've been fortunate at the district to have been awarded and benefit from a lot of grants, and we expect that to continue. But they are uncertain at best, and as Kyle was indicating, we've got a lot of other priorities from council's perspective as well. But that question of affordability is something we're still working on, and we'll be able to bring some more information forward, I think, in the future around that issue. So I just wanted to make sure we talked about those aspects a little bit more, and first step, kind of here's what the issues are, and we'll have to get into some broader solution components around the financing strategies as we move forward.
I have a question about the voting process, because that was a surprise to me with the land value coming in, because obviously if somebody has a $10 million house and they vote no, then that cancels out 10 or 15 people who have a $750,000 to $1 million house who vote yes. So there is obviously you've articulated very clearly the benefits to Eastside Utilities customers and to Coral Beach customers, because we're currently on boil water advisories, or will be in X number of weeks. And then there's the fire flow and the aging infrastructure. But my question would be to those other user groups that form that 325, how would you articulate the benefits to them, to the Berkeley Road user groups, and to those members who have water that's intaken from the lake? because they may not have a water quality issue. So I think there's a very different, or not, sorry, a different reason for them for voting yes to this and seeing this than perhaps an Eastside Utilities customer or Coral Beach customer. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair to say. Probably the key one that we try to convey to that group is the fire protection aspect of it, right? I'm sure that in order to ensure some of those very large homes down there without fire protection in the area is very expensive. So we're hopeful that potentially the cost of joining something like this might offset that so that you would get a public water utility that has fire suppression capabilities adjacent to your property. And then the other part being the water quality aspect. Are they certain that the water that they're drinking is safe? Whereas we can say for sure certain that, yes, we do rigorous testing. There's a whole very mandated process that we have to follow to ensure the water that comes to your house is safe to drink. And so hoping that they might buy on in that process as well.
Would it be possible to do a straw poll, like an exit poll in those areas of the 5 different user groups, just to get a gist of are people in generally in support or not? My next question would be, follow-on question would be, if there was a user group that was not interested in it, is it possible that the district would take it over, considering a smaller subsection than the 350? So maybe Berkeley Road, Eastside and Coral Beach might, or the people with the water intake from the lake and Coral Beach and Berkeley and Eastside. Is there some combination? Does it have to involve the whole 325?
We'll answer it in backwards. I'll answer your second question first. So the challenge with the private group and the Berkeley water utility not being part of it is there's 2 really. One, they're right in the middle, so we got to go right past them anyways. Mm-hmm. And not so much the lower private users, we could probably get around bypassing them, and then it does propose a bit of an unfair concept where they might have this water utility going past it that they benefit from, and we've talked about that too, right? And they aren't contributing to it. The other aspect being it becomes much more challenging because you still have to run that large transmission main out there. It's at high cost. And if those properties aren't involved and there is cost passed on per property, it's going to bring that cost up to the remaining properties out there. Definitely, it's something we can entertain.
But it'd be less than the province is going to charge us.
That's correct. I think it would be. But yeah.
So my final question, and then I'll leave the mic to somebody else. So if their vote is for no, then Eastside Utilities is forced back into the hands of the province with their plan, which would cost users $8,000 a year for 20 years, including the provision of water of the Eastside Utilities, with the upgrades to the water quality, the aging infrastructure, and most importantly, the fire flows. And that would be paid for by the Eastside utility users. However, the benefit of those upgraded water systems would be benefiting the Berkeley Road group, the private water utility, private water lake access group, because they're all in the Carr's Landing fire protection area. How does that work? Because the Eastside Utilities users will have paid 100% of the cost, but the Carr's Landing fire protection area, which is the 325, will get the benefit.
Yeah, and I think that drawing the border using the Carr's Landing, like the fire protection area, might not be the best way to look at it, because it basically adjacent properties to the water system would benefit with that fire protection aspect right there. But even like right now, we have the Lake Pine Water Utility that does have fire suppression capabilities, but it
doesn't respond when there's a Carr's Landing. When Station 81, they have a 1 kilometer hose pipe that connects to a hydrant at the end of Berkeley Road and feeds the whole of Berkeley Road.
I think they would use some of the water from the Lake Pine Water
coming from the other end, but they will still use the Eastside Utilities water hydrants.
Yeah, potentially, and it's a challenge. Like we have areas far just outside of Carr's Landing we have this exact same scenario. They're benefiting from the protection of the water system, but they're not connected nor contributing.
Yeah,
so it's a challenge community-wide, not just in that area. One thing I think we should answer the straw poll, and I'm going to actually turn that over to Ruth just to understand what would be our options potentially around polling those other areas?
Yeah, absolutely. That could be done. So obviously at the discretion of council, what they'd like to see, that with our technology that is evolved over the last year or so, we could easily implement something like that for sure.
Because I think the messaging is so key. I mean, making sure everybody understands the costs and what we're getting into, but equally making sure that the benefit is understood. And that's different depending on what group you're in. So I think there's a different story for each person, and there's different, each property, and there's a different rationale. And some may have a stronger motive than others, but I think maybe articulating that clearly, depending on the user groups and the opportunities in terms of, yes, this also provides the opportunity perhaps with approval from staff, council, whatever, for subdivision and things like that. So I think that's something we need to be.
One thing I'll just add to that is we had a great turnout tonight and we had a good turnout yesterday, but it's representing a small minority of the 325 property owners. So to get a real accurate gauge, I would encourage or recommend that it's almost becoming a door knocking exercise, or definitely a direct mail out. The avenues we're using now are working for those who want to be engaged and want to be get the information. But if we want a real accurate poll or a feeling or how to move forward, we'll definitely have to look at different mechanisms to reach out to those property owners.
I think it would be very good for council to have that overarching opinion, because this is not just one user group, it's the whole community. And I think to get that sense of where the community's lying and maybe where some of the gaps in knowledge are, or where we need to fill some holes, or would be really, really helpful.
I have a little bit more to add to that. The poll itself does actually, when you select that you're part of the Carr's Landing area, it asks you to specify where you get your water from. So we do have that aspect already built into the poll to break it down to try and figure out where those people are coming from. As far as conveying the cost, as Greg kind of alluded, there's so, because the municipality has better options than the province does, we don't fully know exactly how we would go about paying for and delivering this process, right? Maybe there is some aspects of the project that we say, okay, phase one, we're going to go and deliver this part of the project because it has to happen in order to achieve X, Y, and Z. But maybe there's aspects of the improvements we can say, okay, we're ready to take this over, but we're not going to proceed with that until we get grant funding on this part, because it's just financially we're not capable of doing that, right? And so it's hard until we actually move into that next phase to really fully convey how this might all unfold.
Does anyone online have questions? I haven't seen anything on the chat or any hands raised, so please feel free to ask questions. Oh, we have one. Julie, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to know if you get to the point of having a vote and the vote is over 50% for a go, is everybody forced into the pool of users, or how does that work? For people who currently have a well or whatever, presumably they could continue to use their well. How does that work? Because obviously the more people who link up to the system, the less it is per capita for those who are using it.
Yeah, so the way this works, and it's actually a legislative process. It's written right into the law of the community local charter. And so if you define an area that is the local service area, even those that vote against it are included and will be subject to that cost.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies, Wendy. I didn't see you there, so please go ahead with your question.
Thank you again, everybody. And I just want to, I guess I have a comment and a question. The comment is, and it's kind of a family joke, that I call us the mascots of Carr's Landing, because we've been in Carr's Landing since 2003, and we've been Eastside utility users since 2003, obviously. And we're one of the kind of Robin Hood type folk that Kara was perhaps alluding to, that $160,000 spread out over 20 years is a lot. And I would be super grumpy if we were squashed in the process by people that have 10 times the amount of capital resources that we have as a family of 4 living in a 737 square foot log cabin, to address things like fire protection and water quality and aging. All of these things that we're all talking about are so important to me and my family. We've raised our kids in a really tiny house, and they're going to George Eliot, HS Grenda. My husband is the farmers market manager. Sorry, Shane, but everybody knows that. We live and breathe lake country. And I would love to think there's a creative way to find more money, even in Carr's Landing. And I'm not going to name any names because that would be rude. And I don't know if people are here that might be related to the people, but there are people that we all know about in Carr's Landing that have really deep pockets that are building the next Mission Hill, let's just say. So I think we need to approach some people and kind of put their feet to the fire. If they actually care about our community, and if they actually care about making money and drawing thousands of people to Carr's Landing, then they need to be part of the solution, because it cannot be beholden to individual family taxpayers to come up with $20 million to fix this. Nor should it be beholden to the District of Lake Country. It should be beholden on all of us to figure it out. So that's, I guess, a comment. And my question is interior health. They're part of the secondary, sorry, I don't know why I'm doing air quotes, but they're part of the, I'll sit in my hands, sitting on my hands. They're part of the secondary water filtration situation, from my understanding. And it was told to me, because I wasn't at the meeting last night, that an immediate phase 1 fix is sending the intake deeper into the lake, and that would apparently cost $300,000. So yay to that. So how do we work around interior health and their bureaucracy to go ahead with phase 1, which is a lot cheaper than 20 million, and then work through the next phases? Sorry, that's a really long question.
It's a really good question. I'll let you know when we figure that one out as well, because we're challenged with it as well. Like we're building a very large, expensive water treatment plant, and one of the things that we can get huge amount effectiveness by providing a polishing clarification step, and that pretty much will make the water 90 to 95% good. But interior health is mandating that we filter this water at the same time, right? And that about doubles the cost of the price, but that doesn't double the effectiveness of the water treatment, right? It's a dance we've been trying to do with them for over, basically since they brought in the 43210 rule, where you have to start filtering these sources, have to start make sure that it meets these water quality objectives, or they're going to put you on these boil waters or water quality advisories. We've been trying to work with them to get support around a lot of our projects in order to make this happen. For the best we've gotten is letters of support when we write in for our grant programs. Yeah.
Thank you for your honesty. I have a comment, and it's an idea, but I think, what if may make a suggestion, perhaps at a larger table than this even, that people look to other places in the world where we have similar situations and where there are remedies, such as what you suggested, which is using natural resources to filter the water. We don't necessarily need, do we? Do we need a $20 million? Like, I don't know. Anyway, I could go on and on about this, but I'll just be quiet. So thank you.
So maybe just add a couple points there. I mean, there's many different departments and bodies within the provincial government. Interior Health Authority is the regulator and stipulates the treatment standards, and those standards are typically following, what's going on in North America, what's happening in the States, what's happening in Europe. These standards are not unique, and we're probably behind. So, you know, there's good precedence for that level of treatment, and that's what they're requesting. That's what they're asking for us, you know, throughout the province to be doing. We're not the only purveyor facing this. In fact, we're probably one of the last ones, you know, in the valley not to have a treatment plant in place, a filtration plant. In terms of deepening the intake, that is happening. Our understanding is they are planning to proceed with that, and so that should alleviate the boil advisory that's being put onto the Carr's Landing system, you know, every summer. Exact timing, I'm not sure when they're going to be able to do that. They said they thought there might be enough in reserves to advance that soon. I think they're in a design. I'd expect that maybe that happens for next summer. But you'd have, you know, they'll have to determine that. But they are looking to advance that. That's our understanding. I think that's what they're telling the Eastside users and have told us. The things that come after that, and they'd have to increase the rates. So really, their desire is to have the transfer take place. And again, those benefits then become, as we talked about, being tied to borrowing and grant opportunities and these types of things. You know, the discussion around what is the boundary of this local service area is something we've been talking about. And this process is very atypical. This is not typically something that, you know, we're doing all the time in terms of, you know, amalgamating a larger area with a bunch of different users and private utilities, different private utilities and independent, and trying to bring that into an overall servicing strategy. So it's not a common practice to do it in this holistic fashion, but it makes sense to view it in a holistic fashion with a strategy for the whole area. So say we did a local service area that encompassed the whole area, because that's what the council determines the right thing to do. Even if that local service area failed, that wouldn't prevent then going back and maybe changing those boundaries, and maybe even just looking specifically at East Side and doing a local service area just for East Side. And so, you know, that one failed process doesn't mean you couldn't do it, then approach it in a different manner. But you know, we're trying to create something here that creates win-wins, that makes good sense for everybody involved, that people buy into, and is the right solution for the community. And you know, the community has to be involved in designing those solutions. So this is kind of the initial, you know, part of the initial stages of having those discussions and trying to get to that place. So we're hopeful. We are committed, and we don't give up easily. So we'll be there all the way through, and as will council. And at some point we'll find some, I believe, some positive solution for the benefit of the neighborhood and community at large.
Thanks, Greg. We have a question from Michael, and it goes along the train of thought that we were just talking about, but it says, if the vote was a no, do the existing customers of Eastside Utility Water Supply have to pay to upgrade the system, or can the existing system, all be inefficient system, just stay the way it is?
So I think Greg somewhat answered that question, that if the vote was no in a broader area, we can take a look at it in a different manner. But ultimately, the improvements, if it does remain a private water utility, and the improvements and the extent of those improvements is a decision of the province and what they're going to raise the rates to.
Quick question about the fire protection. I really appreciate Greg's answer there, and adding more colour to that. But at the moment, there isn't hydrants along Barclay, and there aren't hydrants along the whole of Carr's Landing Road. My understanding is, with the plans that have been laid out by the district, there would now be the provision of hydrants with the line coming through, the fire protection, it's not just a question of increasing the pipe and the pressure in the current hydrants, but there would be more hydrants added to the system, which would have a definite impact on people's insurance, but also from the safety of the area, given Wendy's comments about the potential expansion of the there's not potential, the expansion of the winery to serve a Mission Hill type crowd of 100,000 a year. Obviously, more people, more risk, more potential of grass fires on the verges. And also we've just seen White Rock Lake fire across the other way. So the provision, as I understand it, is it's not just upgrading the system, it's actually, in terms of pipes, it's actually adding hydrants to our coverage in Carr's Landing. Is that correct?
Yeah, if we would be looking to build the infrastructure to our existing standards. So there's two things. Does it have the storage, or sorry, three things. Does it have the storage behind it to fight the fire? Is the main size adequately to draw a large volume of water through that hydrant? And is the hydrant spacing adequate for modern standards?
That's going to be huge as we hit the climate change and we get more of these heat domes. Having that comprehensive fire system, almost regardless of the water quality, is now, that's what I think I would want to see for my house, basically. So, yeah, thank you.
We have a question from Frank online. Go ahead, Frank.
Hi. So I'm still trying to understand the economics here, which I think I'm far from doing. So the base case to East Side is $18 million over 20 years. So case B, or plan B, to tie it into the Lone Pine and add on everybody in between there, which raises the number up to 325. So the 19 million for that would be shared over the 325, but East Side, the 150, would still pay the 18 million. Is that correct?
In general, you're getting the numbers correct. Exactly how, if it came over to being a public water utility, those exact numbers and how that all would flush out are still fully to be determined. But in general, the way you're looking at it, if it was fully user group paid, that's the correct way to look at it.
Okay,
But-
so
Hank,
it's
Frank.
not just 18 million to East Side. It's going to be 18 million plus, unless there's some trade-off by joining Lake Country through water quality or something else as the years go by. Is that like that? You need those two scenarios: the base case to East Side, which is standalone, and then the second case.
I'm hearing no's that I misunderstood it. So maybe Greg could hop in and maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, it's the 19 million divided over 325 properties.
Right.
It's not that plus. It's 19 million over the 325. So that right there, cuts it in half.
So sorry. So is the 19 million the same as the 18 million to East Side, or are they two separate?
They're two separate supply strategies. The East Side one was to replace basically the pump station on Okanagan Lake and put in UV treatment, new reservoirs to provide the adequate fire storage, and upgrading the distribution networks. The concept that we are advancing or suggesting is the preferred option. Brings water from Beaver Lake over, uses existing reservoirs, and then extends the piping network through the broader area. So they're two different delivery methodologies, and so it's and then the cost is split amongst a broader group when we're looking at the whole Carr's Landing area.
So the reason I guess I'm a little confused is when you drew the red arrow, it stopped at East Side. So none of the East Side improvements are required if the water comes from Lake Pine, like the reservoir upgrade and the line upgrades and the fire hydrants. Is that all part of the 19 million now?
Yes. Yes, and so we wouldn't, we would abandon that existing pump station and intake. There's still some other improvements. There's some distribution mains that need to be done in the east side area. And part of that is replacing aging infrastructure. So there are some improvements still on the east side that happens. But we're making use of existing infrastructure, and this is what we were talking about before. Exactly, what do we need to do up front, and what could wait? So maybe some of that distribution main upsizing, replacement in the east side, that's something that could potentially wait a while. But I think what the drawing that Kyle presented there just kind of showed the concept of bringing it over into that area.
Okay, so for $1 million more, right? For $19 million, East Side gets the same benefit it would get for $18 million out of 150 pockets. For 19 million, we get the same benefit, but over 325 pockets. Is that right?
That's correct. It's intended to bring it up in compliance with the district current standards and bylaws.
Right. So something like extending the intake out into the lake would just be a stopgap measure, for the first 5 years or something, and because that wouldn't be required after the system was hooked up to Lake Pine. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I think I'm with you now. So the option B is much better economics than option A for sure. No question. I mean, your rate base is double, right?
Yeah, and especially if we start looking at opportunities for.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't clear that East Side got the same benefit for the Lake Pine connection. Okay.
I would also add, Frank, if we're going with, sorry, it's Carr here. If we're going with the district's option, the benefits extend outside of East Side utilities, because we were just talking about if we go with the district's plan, the improvements to the fire flows would not just happen at the lake East Side utilities hydrants. Those benefits would actually be felt wider throughout the community, with additional hydrants being placed outside of the current East Side utilities limitations, which would bring stronger fire suppression, not just in terms of volume of water and pressure, but actually in terms of being able to fill directly from a hydrant to properties along the full length of Barclay Road and along the full length of Carr's Landing Road up to the boundary, which is something we don't have at the moment. At the moment, if you are have a fire on one side of Barclay Road and you're at the wrong end of the hydrant, then the lines will go so far, they'll go about 1 kilometer. But then other than that, you're filling bladders, you're filling fire trucks, and that obviously impacts fire response. So although the costs are very similar, and then the defrayed costs per user are going to be much less because we're going among a bigger number of people, plus you have the options of grant funding. But you also have a bigger benefit to the community in terms of the fire flow. So those people who are outside of East Side utilities but still want to vote on this, they will see a benefit directly to them in terms of having a fire hydrant, better quality fire hydrant with more water. And the fundamental thing is it will be nearer to their home than they have currently.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question online. From Julie, it says, could Coral Beach users potentially be on the hook a few years later for a similar cost if East Side goes it alone?
Yeah, let's say the hypothetical is the local service area doesn't go ahead, East Side goes on its own. There is some pretty extensive upgrades that need to happen at the Coral Beach system. That is a system that's managed by the district, and ultimately the recovery method is something that would be discussed with council, but it would be probably looking at some pretty significant increases as well in order to pay for that infrastructure.
There's no more questions online.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Ruth, for that presentation. Really informative. I think we'll just take a short break and we'll move on to the Carr's Landing Community and Rec Association General Meeting. Thank you.